everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and welcome to a solo special episode of Primetime Crisis. Today I'm going to talk about the rest of Teen Wolf Season 1. I talked about this a little bit on the Omnibus several months ago, and I'm now going to finish up real quick Season 1 so I can jump into Season 2. I am on my own today because it's going to be a couple weeks before we do the Omnibus, and I was able to sneak this in, luckily, so that I can go ahead and get on to the next season, and I'm going to knock these down now. I've been enjoying this. People have been asking me to talk about this for a long time, and finally at the end of Season 1. It's got a cool cliffhanger. Kind of excited to get into the second season, and away we go. Let's go ahead and talk about it. So I got the first 5 episodes of this. The first season is, I think, 12 episodes long, so I'll talk about the back end of it and this kind of as a whole, without repeating myself, hopefully, too much. The big important things I said before that I continue to feel about the show that I want to go ahead and mention is that I am more and more kind of getting why Malik, who I wanted to say thanks, Malik's one of our Patreon subscribers who supports the channel a lot in myriad ways, and he sent me these a long time ago and asked me to review them. This was before we were doing the Omnibus, and before I had the rule of, because of time constraints and things, I will watch the first episode of a show, and the next episode, I promised him back then season overviews, which is why I am doing these. That's not to say that I'll never do a season overview of a thing, but I don't do it, I don't promise it for donation. If I really get into a show that somebody requests, I will of course continue talking about it, but usually I just promise the first episode. I told him a long time ago I would do these, so here I am, and I wondered why he wanted me to watch this, because I'm not a horror guy, I'm not a big teen drama guy, despite my weird love-hate relationship and my constant flirtation with Smallville, so I wasn't sure why he asked me to look at this, and after the first 5 episodes, I figured it was probably because it has a lot of things in common with Smallville, and because Scott McCall is in his way kind of a proto-superhero, and kind of a high school superhero, so I still feel that way about it, that it is what Smallville should have been. By the end of the first season, it even does a lot of things that I always complain first season Smallville didn't do. I will spoil the crap out of this. So by the end of the season, Allison, the love interest, who might be my favorite love interest right now in anything, I can't think of even a contender right now of somebody in television, of a female love interest for a main male protagonist that I like more than Allison. I have completely fallen in love with this character and this actor, and I know she's in other stuff. I kind of want to just look at whatever she's in, even if it's a thing I wouldn't usually watch, because I am enamored with this actress. I think she's absolutely just captivating. I'm so impressed. I'll get back to the point I was making in a second. I'm so impressed with the command she has, like, she's a really good actress. The command she has over her facial expressions. She seems to always know what she's conveying at any time, and I'm really jealous of that, because sometimes this is a weird thing to talk about. I'll make a facial expression, and then I'll go look at it in the mirror, and I'm like, oh, that is nothing like what I thought it was. She has such, like, self-assuredness about, and it seems like so comfortable in her own skin, I guess is the right way to put it, that she knows at any time what her face is doing. And it's astounding, just all of the different feelings she can convey in like 30, 45 seconds. It's insanely natural. She's really impressive. And she's just so stupid likable. I forget if it's Stiles or who it is, but there's a line somebody has toward the end of the season that's like, or maybe it's even her best friend, who's like, how can you not like Allison? It's impossible not to like Allison. And it's really impressive to watch like a teen angst drama and actually agree with that statement. How could you not like it? How could you not like this character? She's surprisingly reasonable, and maybe sometimes goes even a little bit too far in the reasonable direction, I gotta say, but like, she doesn't respond in super melodramatic ways, but she's also immature in the way you would expect a high school student to be immature. She's just really, she's really fun, she's really lovable. every heterosexual guy her age should want to date her. And if she was Lana Lang in Smallville, I would then understand why she has all these stalkers. Like, this is who Smallville thinks Lana is. They think she's Allison from Teen Wolf. Like a decade after Smallville was originally made, like first season Smallville comes out. They talk about Lana in that show like she's this character. This character has personality traits, I understand. She has interests. She is not insanely selfish. Like, she's not just not unlikable, but she also, like, feels like a living flesh and blood actual character. But I can say that about everybody in this show. Even the characters that are supposed to be unlikable, there's dimension to them. There are layers. There's more to them. So you get Jackson, who's the guy who played what's his name? Red Arrow in Arrow. Roy Harper. He's he's great in this, but like, he's obnoxious, and he's supposed to be obnoxious. He's this like, everybody that acts like a really immature idiot in the show's actually aware that they are that way, and they're not doing it for cheap drama like Smallville does it. They're not the heroic characters yet, anyway. They are characters who have a lot of growing up to do. And even Scott, of course, has a lot of growing up to do. He's really naive at the beginning of this. He is pretty selfish. He's very Peter Parker. I talked about that in my previous video on this. And you get Jackson, who is really unsure of himself, and so he tries to project strength by being the bully and put down the kids that he thinks are either like easy to bully, easy marks, or people he's really jealous of and are like, taking over on the lacrosse team. I love it when everything gets put into perspective for him toward the end. I can't remember who it is that says it, if it's Derek or who it is, but I think it's Derek. But there's a character toward the end of the season that takes him aside and is like, no one cares about you and your stupid high school lacrosse team. Like, you need to get over yourself. It's just high school. And Scott even is kind of given that dressing down at one point about Allison. Like, she's just your high school girlfriend. It's not actually love. The difference is with them, it actually kind of seems to be. It's kind of that, it's not just puppy dog love. It's kind of that, like, high school sweetheart. Like, we found each other before we reached real maturity, but we might outlive that. And I'm assuming that doesn't actually end up happening with them, since I know that she's not in the show past season 3, and I'm assuming that has something to do with why I've been told not to watch this after 3. I don't know what this show is without her. I'm going to talk more about her in a minute. But anyway, so, and this is not like me crushing on an attractive actress. I'm genuinely in love with that character. Like, I'm jealous of that character. I wish I had come up with her. She's such an interesting person. But anyway, so you get so you get Jackson, who, we could have just made him the bully the whole season, right? Like, I'm looking at analogs for Smallville, and you've got Jackson is your Whitney Fordman. We tried to give Whitney a little bit more dimension by the end of the season, where, like, he wasn't just the stupid jock bad guy character, but ultimately it was just, well, he wants to follow in his father's footsteps, and he goes off the war and he dies. This is more interesting than that, and is not done yet, but he's still around by the end. Jackson wants to be a werewolf. He's so jealous. He's this really shallow guy who has to have all the perfect high school accolades, and he's so trapped in that world, stuck in that like a tiny society, and he can't see the bigger picture, and he doesn't see why he shouldn't have what Scott has. Well, the only reason that Scott is the star lacrosse player now and I'm playing second fiddle is because he is a werewolf and he has all these great abilities, and so I want that too. And he tries to get the alpha who we finally meet, who is absolutely terrifying, and he reminds me of like an evil Paul Rudd. I don't know who that actor is, but he looks a little bit like Paul Rudd. He's like if Paul Rudd played like a horrifying, werewolf character that comes out of a coma and wants revenge on the people that did it to him and killed his family. And I'll talk about him in a minute too. But anyway, so the rest of the back end of that season, Jackson is trying to become a werewolf, and everybody has clear motivations. We understand what everybody's trying to get and why, and if it's stupid, the show knows it, and they either learn from it or they learn from it and also really, really pay for it. And I unfortunately, reading some stuff on Wiki, had something major that happens with Jackson spoiled for me, but I now know how Jackson will end up paying for this. And I'm excited to see where that ends up going. But I won't give that away in case you want to watch this along with me, and I'll have season 2 done here pretty soon. So if you want to go ahead and binge the next season, a couple weeks I should have another video up on this. But anyway, see, I hate to promise things in case something weird comes up, but I'm pretty sure in a couple weeks I'll have another video up on this. So with Jackson, he gets scratched, and some people in the know, I think, including the Alpha, think that he might turn, or maybe it's just Allison's family. I forget, the werewolf hunters. But anyway, he gets scratched, and there's a question of whether or not a scratch can turn you into a werewolf. I talked about this last time too, how interesting this mythology is and how it's treated like a vampire mythology. I would argue that the rules about the mythology are even a little bit more figured out and well explained than they are in Buffy. There's a little bit of backtracking that has to happen in Buffy because it's not as interested in its mythology as it is its characters, which is good, but it doesn't have enough of a handle on that sometimes, and that's one of my big complaints about Joss Whedon's Angel Buffyverse, with Buffy Angelverse. With this, they've got it all figured out like a well-oiled machine, fine-tuned machine. Very, like, right away. They know what all this is, and they're just presenting it to us as the season goes along. That is probably my favorite thing about it, besides Allison. Just learning about how the mythology works and trying to guess at it and being wrong and not really figuring it out myself. The primal wage thing, the pack, the hunting is packs thing. It's all like I said, well figured out and really interesting. You have this kind of man versus himself and man versus nature thing all at the same time with the werewolf mythology, and I would have avoided this like the plague because I don't inherently care about werewolves. I didn't care about vampires that much before Buffy either, so with a lot of horror things, I need good material to get me into it in the first place. This is not making me want to run off and look at werewolf things, and I gotta be honest with you, I don't get excited when Scott turns into a werewolf. Like, it looks fine on a TV budget, but it's not like the superhero putting his costume on. Like, I'm much more interested in Scott, doing research and just trying to figure out how to live his regular everyday life while dealing with all this irritating werewolf stuff that keeps happening to him and ruining his personal life. I'm way more interested in that, like I said, that and his having to investigate things to learn about the mythology than I am about the kind of the occasional obligatory werewolf fight. I will say the Alpha looks really cool. That I guess I did start to get kind of excited about. Whenever the bad guy would turn into the Alpha, I'm like, okay, cool. It's on now. But with not so much with Scott turning into a werewolf, or even or even Derek. Derek is, of course, a massive wild card all through the season. You never know how much you can trust him. He is kind of the angel for the season. I probably said that before, except that very quickly you understand that even though Angel's a vampire, he's on our side. Derek is all about Derek. He's on Derek's side. And at the end of the season, he's the Alpha, and that's potentially horrifying, because he's basically been trying to control Scott the whole season, and spins it like it's for his own good, to some degree, and he's he's got to give up his personal life. He kind of has the stick argument a little bit, like get rid of distractions, and you can't stick from Daredevil. You can't control your werewolf side if you have distractions, and you're going to hurt the people in your life, so you might as well get rid of them. And Scott ends up trying to kind of abandon Derek as his mentor, because A, he doesn't want to do that, and B, he finds out that Derek's kind of full of crap with some of that stuff, because there's a really cool episode, and I thought I would hate this episode when I got into it and realized what the premise was. Scott has to, at first, try to stop seeing Allison at all, because, first of all, of course, if he turns into a werewolf around her, he might kill her, and he wants to kill people when he's a werewolf, because he's a feral animal, and that's what they do. But it seems to be at first that he can't control his transformations if he's around her, and then it turns out that it's more that there's actually a huge positive to that as well, which is if he is with her, he won't turn into a werewolf. So, like, no matter how much pressure, when he's under a lot of pressure, when he's really stressed out, that's when he has the potential to turn into a werewolf, or that's when he's likely to. And Stiles ends up giving him like a heart pressure device, and when it starts to beep real loud, and real fast, we know that he's about to turn into a werewolf. And if he's around her, like, this sounds kind of sappy, but it actually kind of worked for me. It's this kind of like, true love conquers all thing. Like, we know that he cares about her more than anyone, and that it seems to actually be real love and not just a lust thing. Where if she's around, he's not going to turn into a werewolf because he does not want to hurt her. And that is not where I thought that would go. I thought we would have episodes where he had to stay away from her, and was avoiding her and not answering her calls, and that we would keep kind of playing that for drama, and that it would break them up for a long time. And it does, they do end up breaking up, but not over that. It's over the lying thing, which, again, could have been awful, because that's the Smallville thing. Oh, you won't tell me what you're doing, even though you've told me that you can't tell, and it's not because you don't trust me, it's because you might put me in danger, or in Clark's case, my parents don't want anyone to know, that kind of thing. And so I'm going to keep kind of going back and forth on whether or not I will date you, but ultimately I'm going to keep taking it personally. And Allison doesn't do that. Allison is simply confused. She spends the whole season assuming, giving him the benefit of the doubt, but also having a hard time not feeling bad about it and taking it a little bit personally, because you would, but she can tell that there's something going on that he just can't talk about. And there is a last straw when there's an episode where they're trapped in the high school after dark, and it reminds me a lot of, it's not funny like this episode, but there's levity in all of this, but it's not as funny. It reminds me a little bit of the second season episode that introduces Spike in Buffy, where Buffy has to protect her friends and the principal and her mother from Spike and his vampire posse without their knowing that she's the Slayer. How in the world do you do that? Well, Scott has exactly the same problem here, and he ends up telling Allison, I have to run off and deal with this, and it doesn't make any sense to her that he would do that, and she can't deal with his putting himself into danger without explaining to her why he's doing that, and also leaving them because it doesn't seem like he's really protecting them. And so it turns into, it's not just how dare you not tell me what's going on, it's I don't know if I trust you. And that's what she says. I don't know if you're the person that I thought you were. Now, later on, she starts to talk to him a little bit too quickly, and some of that is just chemistry. Some of that is they cannot stay away from each other. They have that much chemistry. They care that much about each other. But that's where I think she's maybe a little bit too reasonable. I think that comes together a little bit too easy initially, but the conflict continues. She does continue to not be sure if she can trust him. He has opportunities to tell her what's going on, and he doesn't take them. He honestly should have been where her understanding about werewolves comes from, and he's not. I meant to say this way earlier, but the big thing this does that Smallville should have done is gives her the secret at the end of the first season. We had that opportunity with the freaking tornado, and they take it here. That is the big cliffhanger between 11 and 12. Scott has finally magnificently turned into a werewolf, and she sees it, and there's this kind of goofy slow motion thing. She's like, "Oh my God, you're a werewolf!" And then she has to deal with that. But at that point, she's not learning for the first time about werewolves. She's already been told by her crazy hunter aunt, who, by the way, again spoiling everything, I did not expect to die at the end of the season. I think I'm remembering that right. I'm pretty sure she's dead at the end of the season. And she was kind of interesting. I thought there was maybe more to do with her. I don't know how I feel about her already going out like that. But she's dead. The Alpha's dead. This show is not scared of killing off characters. Everybody's on the table. Everybody's potentially disposable. I think Stiles could go at any time. I feel like there's a lot of people that could be on the table. I'll talk about more analogs to Smallville characters here in a second. But... Stiles made me think of that, because there's some other things I want to talk about with that. But anyway, so she has already shown Allison her family's. Oh, I guess it's her place. I guess she's built this out of. She's built like a lair for werewolf hunting, like underneath their her family's house, or her family's old house, I forget, and she's got Derek trussed up down there, and that's a whole twisted, messed up relationship where apparently they had a relationship at one time, and she kind of has her cake and eats it too, where she looks at the werewolves as lesser beings and kind of animals, but she also does what she will with them, including having sex with one if she thinks he's hot enough, and that's messed up. There's a whole thing that I think comes maybe a little bit too late. I'm not sure. I don't know if I want to know how much I'm supposed to actually trust Allison's parents and the werewolf hunters before I do. Maybe it's okay that throughout the season we continue to wonder like how like, I don't know, good or messed up these people are, if it's for sport or if they're actually hunting the werewolves to protect people. And it turns out they have a code, and they talk about the code, but we don't really know much about it until the end. And she is starting to break the code. She's going too far. She, at the end, grabs Allison and goes to kill the Alpha and Scott. And Scott, as far as we know, hasn't killed anyone. He's underage, and he hasn't killed anyone, and that is against the code. And so she ends up basically dying because she's broken the code, and the show's not going to allow her to live anymore, I think. But I like that. I like the vampire code thing. It's going to make Allison's part in this really interesting after this, because she has a natural proclivity for archery. She could be on Team Arrow easy. She, like, last season on Arrow, Diggle wanted to be the Green Arrow, but doesn't even know how to fire a bow and arrow. Had to use a crossbow. She could be Green Arrow. She could be any of the Arrow acolytes. She could easily be on that team, and I'm really interested to see coming into the next season what that's going to be like with the skills she has and what she knows and what she does with it. She's, I'm sure, not going to be like a bad guy hunter, because she and Scott very much get back together at the end of the season, and she kind of professes her love for him again. And for a minute there, looks like she might straight up kill him, that she's starting to buy the Kool-Aid from her aunt a little bit. And again, I understand that, because from everything she's seen, turning into a werewolf makes you evil. Like there is maybe, we're not talking about this, but there's maybe that question of, do you even have a soul anymore when you're a werewolf? From her perspective, we know you do. I like that thing with Jackson, where this is a thing we can do in this show. In Buffy, anytime anybody wanted to be a vampire and they know what vampirism is and does to you, they're crazy, because you lose your soul and you're not you anymore. But you are still you if you turn into a werewolf in this universe, and there's not enough of a downside that it wouldn't appeal to you? Like, yes, with vampirism and Buffy, living forever is a thing that you would want. But if you don't have your soul anymore, you're not you. So then there's very much this like an existential question of whether or not you would even be the being experiencing it, and you wouldn't be. We know that for a fact in that show. But with this, there are a couple of people that are giving the opportunity, or either trying to take the opportunity or given the opportunity to be a werewolf, and I totally get the allure. Stiles is this is one of my favorite scenes in the season. The Alpha tries to give Stiles the choice to be a werewolf. Stiles begrudgingly helps him because he's kind of forced to, but at the end of all that, the Alpha is like, okay, I will, if you want, as a reward for actually helping me find Derek, find the lair for the vampire hunter chick, which, by the way, he does by finally giving the Alpha Scott's username and password, which are both Allison, and that whole thing is hilarious. And I just love like the Alpha just looks at him, he's just like, really, his username is Allison and his password is also Allison. That scene's very funny. He gives him the choice, and says you can be a werewolf, and you can tell that Stiles, even though he doesn't actually end up taking it, he's tempted, and he tries to look like he's not tempted, but he's pretty obviously tempted. And finally he says, I don't want to be like you. And then the scene comes out and tells you this, because that he's tempted, because then the Alpha says, you're lying, I can tell. He's got that Matt Murdock thing. Your heart raced when you said that. I know that you do want to be like us. And he has got some jealousy for Scott. He and Scott are on the outs a little bit over it earlier on in the season. So, looking again at analogs for Smallville, obviously he is the Pete Ross in the situation, and all of these characters actually get things to do. They get their own character arcs. It's not a straight-up ensemble show. I mean, it all revolves around a protagonist who is Scott, but I really like that it doesn't just fill in the blanks for supporting cast and say, okay, we're gonna struggle to figure out what in the world to do with each of these characters each season. Everybody feels really essential to the story, and they all have something to contribute, and they all have real skills and something to bring to the table, unless the point of them is that they don't. And that is, of course, our bully character in Jackson. He doesn't really have anything to bring to the table. He's not incompetent. He's not a complete idiot. But again, he's got the wrong priorities. His heart's in the wrong place. He's good at what he's good at, but he's held back by his insecurities. But you've got his girlfriend who stops dating him by the end of the season, or who he stops dating, partly in order to make Scott jealous of him and try to force him to make him a werewolf, because he doesn't understand how the werewolf thing works. At first, he thinks that Scott can make him a werewolf, but it takes an Alpha to do that. I thought we were going to have a love triangle, and I really appreciated that we didn't. He and Allison have a really interesting chemistry, because again, how do you not like Allison? He has a really interesting chemistry with her, but he's not actually interested. He doesn't actually want to date her. And I thought that was, again, a really cool surprise direction to take that. Really subverted my expectations. But so, he's, like I said, the Whitney Fordman character. Stiles is the Pete Ross character, and very much what we should have done with Pete Ross. We should have given Pete Ross some kind of skill that he could contribute to Clark Kent's mission to save people. And Stiles is the son of a cop, and he's very much his father's son, and he's really resourceful and has a lot of ingenuity, and Scott ends up showing quite a bit of ingenuity as well. I really like all the ways in which he manipulates Allison in the latter half of the season, out of danger. There's all these places where the Alpha's trying to get to her because he wants to make Scott kill all of his pack, all of his friends and family, so that he won't have anybody left, and he'll give up his humanity entirely and go into full-on werewolf mode and join the Alpha's pack. That's what he's after. And of course, it doesn't work, but he tries everything he can, and it's a valiant effort. And Scott comes up with all these really interesting ways to avoid Allison getting hurt by the Alpha. But anyway, and then you've got your Lana character. Is what Lana always should have been. It's just the show's not scared to change the status quo. I mean, that's what it all boils down to. It's not afraid of people knowing about the secret because it's not about a superhero having a secret identity. I mean, obviously he's trying to keep his identity secret from as many people as he possibly can. But it's a pretty character-driven show. Whenever a person would find out, the show lets them find out. It doesn't make people dumb so they don't figure things out, and it doesn't stagnate and hold your hand and string you along so that you'll keep watching every week. And it feels like an ongoing narrative instead of a few episodes that actually matter and a whole bunch of filler, which is why I'm glad more shows are going to this kind of format. This was several years ago now, 2011. This is I think 2011, 2012. This is a 12 episode show, and every episode counts. And some of the episodes stand alone in the sense that there's an arc or an idea that makes it a singular piece that fits into a whole, but it doesn't have standalone episodes that you can skip, and it is one ongoing narrative. I'm at half an hour. I've said most of what I wanted to say. A couple of criticisms I wanted to lob at this are mostly particular scenes. There are places where it certainly is too typical teen angst drama for my taste. Ultimately, all of the characters are really interesting and allowed to, again, have layers and learn and grow. And so it always gets over those things. I always live by the end. And when it's funny because even this ends with like a spring formal dance. I don't know if it's a spring formal in this, but it's a dance a lot like a spring formal like you had in Smallville. That's hilarious. Everything about this season is what the first season of Smallville should have been. I could write a paper on this. It's preposterous, and they've got to be looking at that to some degree. The lacrosse thing is the football thing, and also Smallville was so typical that it's not like a lot of that was original. I mean, a lot of it was just the obvious things you would do in a first season of a high school drama. But anyway, it does that thing sometimes, and it's not doing it ironically, where it doesn't do it much, but occasionally you'll have a song that seems to kind of be, I talk about this sometimes, that seems to kind of be dictating what's going on in the scene, and that takes me out a little bit. It's a little bit silly. I'm not going to begrudge it the popular, the pop music, because it's that kind of show, and it's able to subvert expectations and surprise me more by looking more or less like one of those shows and then surprising me with things. Buffy does the same thing. And I also should mention it's a wonderfully stylized show. It gets pretty bloody, pretty violent. And I like that for this material. It is a real horror show. It's not dancing around that. I like that a lot. But anyway, I'm not a big fan of blood and gore, but it's that kind of show, and it doesn't skimp on what it's trying to deliver on, or what it's professing to be, I should say. But anyway, there are a couple of scenes that are really contrived because it's struggling to get from point A to point B. And these will sound like minor things, but they really jumped out at me, and I've got to talk about them. This will be the last thing I bring up. The first one, overall, I really like this, but these were hilarious to me. There's a scene where Stiles needs information from his dad, who's the sheriff and who's conducting the investigation and can't tell him about things because they're classified. And he does the typical, like, get somebody drunk to get them to start spilling information scene. And he does it with one drink. Like, immediately, his dad starts spilling his guts after he's been drinking for 5 seconds. That's not how that works, no matter how much you've had. Like, if you down, and I'll talk about the glass in a minute because it's ridiculous. Even if you down that much whiskey, 5 seconds later, you're not going to immediately be like, oh, what were you saying again? And then start, like, telling him everything he wants to know. No, this is a massive shortcut. It's preposterous. This show is too good for this scene. He says, Sal says, hey, Dad, you look really stressed out. Would you like some whiskey? Sure, son, but just pour me an ounce. Don't pour me too much, son. So he gets a glass, and Stiles goes, I'm gonna go to hell for this. And he starts pouring the whiskey, and he, like, practically fills the glass. It's like 2/3 full. So it's several shots. But I still say 5 seconds after this, he's not that drunk. It would take a while for it to work through his system. And he hands it to his dad, and his dad drinks the whole thing, and he says, wow, that sure felt like a lot for an ounce. And it's after a while before he says it. Like, he really thinks that because he's not looked at the glass, he's only drank an ounce. That would be like somebody asking for a, like, glass of milk, and you hand them a carton of milk, and they drink the whole carton, and just because they didn't look at it, they thought it was a glass of milk. I mean, I realize it's, like, in different cartons, but if you have, like, a pitcher of milk, like a much larger glass of milk, just because you didn't, like, look at it with your eyes, you didn't know how much milk you drank. And in this case, how much whiskey you drank. Like, that's really silly. That was insanely contrived, and I could not believe it did that. The other one is, and this was honestly kind of cringy for me, so Scott is not supposed to go to the dance, and he breaks the rules and he goes anyway. He's suspended from extracurricular activities because he's getting horrible grades, which, by the way, I love that there are those kinds of consequences in this show. He has not been doing his schoolwork and his homework because he's constantly dealing with all this werewolf crap, and he's not paying attention to things in class. And we keep having scenes in class where he's not done the reading. And I like that he's not somehow getting it all done anyway and passing his classes. I don't know how Clark gets through any of his school. And so it's an actual problem. And the lacrosse coach is like, well, you can either quit lacrosse or not go to the dance, and I'm not going to let you quit lacrosse, so you're not going to the dance. Well, he goes anyway. And the coach sees him there. I think it's the coach. And he's like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. And there's enough people in between him that he has a hard time getting to him, and he's working his way through the crowd, and he finally catches up to Scott. And Scott has this ingenious plan where he's going to dance with a gay guy, like force this gay guy to dance with him, so that he can manipulate the situation so that when he's called out by the coach, everyone around him will think he's a homophobe. And it doesn't play at all, because all the coach would have to... So this is what happens. The coach, like, calls him out. He says, you're not supposed to... And then everybody's looking at him, and he's suddenly worried that he's looking like he's doing this huge social faux pas, and he's going to get, like, in trouble or something because he's acting like he's... Like it's wrong for these two men to be dancing, these two boys to be dancing, because he's homophobic or something. And he just says, you're not supposed to be... Oh, no, I don't mean like that. Like, I don't have a problem with that. All he has to say is, Scott's not supposed to be here. He's in trouble. He got suspended from these activities. That's all he had to say. And I think everybody would immediately be like, oh, yeah, that's right, I forgot about that. He's not supposed to be here. That shouldn't have worked. That was dumb. Anyway, overall, it's pretty solid. It's still not, like, exactly my thing, but I'm surprised by how much it's winning me over. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm excited to watch and talk about the second season. So anyway, didn't mean to go for a whole 40 minutes here, but there you go. First season of Teen Wolf. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. Sure appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed this overview of the first of the latter half of the first season of Teen Wolf. And I will be back with you again soon with another one. And look forward to lots more videos coming your way here on Geekvolution. I am Captain Logan. Thanks again for watching, folks.